all of a sudden I felt my heart stop. And the moment I felt it stop, I popped out of my body. And as soon as I popped out, I just felt so liberated. I felt so much peace. I felt so amazing. It's so wonderful to be out of the body and out of everything that I had just been experiencing uh, down while it was in my body. And I wanted nothing to do with my body. I also knew exactly what had happened. I had died. I was so excited. I felt great, and I knew exactly what to do.
Welcome back to the show. I'm here with Nadine Telishewsky. Nadine had a near-death experience when she was 24, a near-death-like experience when she was 41, and also she's had angel visitations in her childhood. Nadine, thank you so much for being my guest. I'm honored to have you.
Thank you, Tia. Thank you for inviting me. I appreciate it.
You've had so many things happen to you in your life, but let's start with your near-death experience when you were 24 years old.
When I was 24, I ended up having one when I went to a party at the time and a man had drugged my drink with a date rape drug. So I ended up having an overdose and a massive heart attack from it. On New Year's Eve in 2004, I went to that New Year's Eve party with my best friend at the time. So I went there and I was only there for 2 hours. I only sipped on 2 mixed drinks during that 2 hour time. Most of the time, our drinks and belongings were in one room set up in the house to leave them in. And most of the time, I was in other rooms of the house just chatting with people, dancing, things like that. Unbeknownst to me, somebody had drugged my drink with some kind of date rape drug. And after 2 hours, I started to feel not good at all, and I felt really high and out of it. And at one point, my legs suddenly just collapsed out from underneath me, is the best I can explain that. I just fell straight down in a sitting position. I could barely move my legs. And I realized I started to be more paralyzed from my legs and was slowly moving up my body. And I realized what must have happened. And I thankfully told my best friend. And as I became more and more out of it and became more paralyzed, I realized at one point, okay, I'm going to completely pass out. And right before I did, I remember just yelling out in my head, God, please help me, because I was scared. I didn't know what was happening. And I completely passed out. At that point, my best friend had let me know later on. She was there with me on the floor in a hallway where I had collapsed. And she said 3 men had come up to her and said, oh, she must just be drunk. We're going to pick her up and just go put her in a bedroom upstairs and she can go sleep it off. I'm sure she'll be fine. But because of what I had told my best friend, she wouldn't allow anyone to touch me, thankfully. So that was wonderful. And she said a little while later, I started vomiting a black substance, which ended up being blood in my system. And they called 911. And all I know is that I woke up in a hospital 6 hours later, so disoriented, feeling absolutely horrible. And the doctor was looking at me funny. And he said, we weren't sure if you were going to make it because when you were being wheeled into the hospital, you were having a massive heart attack and we had to pump you full of potassium to stop the heart attack. And he told me it was because of a drug overdose. So I tried to explain to him, I have never used drugs before, and I only sipped on 2 drinks and everything else. But the hospital staff was not very nice, and they didn't treat me very well, and they didn't seem to believe me. And as soon as I was able to more just get up off of the gurney, I think you call it, that I was on, and I was holding onto a wall just to try to get to a washroom to use it, they pretty much said, oh yeah, she's fine, and discharged me. So they gave me a prescription for potassium because they had let me know I needed to regulate my heart for the next few days, especially after me having a heart attack. But the problem is I went home, I lived by myself, and I felt so terrible after going through this experience. So I literally just laid in bed all day. I didn't have the energy for anything else. So I never got this prescription. So now it's the next day, it's January 1st, and it's the evening time. And by that point, I felt so horrible. I was underneath all my covers and I was shivering and I didn't have any energy and I was so disoriented. And I felt my heart going back and forth, beating really quickly. And then it would beat very slowly a few times and it would go back and forth like that. And all of a sudden, I felt my heart stop. And the moment I felt it stop, I popped out of my body. And as soon as I popped out, I just felt so liberated. I felt so much peace. I felt so amazing. It's so wonderful to be out of the body and out of everything that I had just been experiencing down while it was in my body. And I wanted nothing to do with my body. I also knew exactly what had happened. I had died. I was so excited. I felt great. And I knew exactly what to do because, especially having angel experiences in my youth, even one time I had a very brief shared near-death experience with somebody when I was 17, and I actually briefly snuck into heaven when I was 18, which is another story. But the point is, I knew the way, right? So I just started to fly up faster and higher, more and more, because I was just so excited and I wanted to go back home to heaven. So as I was in the middle of heading up, all of a sudden everything went completely dark just for a few seconds, but it wasn't scary and it didn't feel bad at all. It just felt so comforting. And then it lifted and I realized I was now over this beautiful valley and I saw these mountains in the background and they had trees and flowers and this beautiful meadow in the foreground, and everything was just so beautiful and so perfect. And it just had the most amazing energy coming off of everything. So as I was admiring this of where I suddenly ended up, all of a sudden I realized there was this gigantic, hundreds of foot tall creature like being, or at least so I thought at first, next to me. And this actually was the angel of death. This was Azrael. And he was wearing a costume of pitch black smoke over him and over his giant wings. But I knew that he was this beautiful, compassionate angel of light and unconditional love underneath, because I can both feel it and I can see the most beautiful light just pouring out of his eyes and his nose and his mouth and his ears. So for whatever reason, I still don't know, he was just wearing that costume. So what had happened was when I was flying up, he saw that I was somewhat headed in the wrong direction. So he had scooped me up in his giant wing to help me get to the right place I needed to get to. And then he had released me, and that's why now I saw him flying beside me. And I went and telepathically spoke to him, which was normal for me to do. Because again, in my youth, when I had angel experiences, it was always telepathic, speaking with them. I went and I just thanked him for helping me to get to the right place. And he simply said back to me, "We are pleased for you to be back home." And then he went and flew to the side of one of the mountain tops. And I saw that he was just very diligently looking around and paying attention and overseeing everyone who was transitioning on for the day, because that was his job. So at that point, I suddenly saw this beautiful, strong beam of bright white light just pouring down close by to me. So I went and I flew into the light. And the moment that I did, I was just absolutely encompassed by unconditional love. And this light wasn't just light, it was a vibration, it was an energy, it was unconditional love, it was light as well, and all that together. And I knew that it was coming from God, and I knew it was coming from a higher realm of heaven. And it just absolutely encompassed me and overtook me. And it was the most wonderful feeling that you cannot describe, because there is absolutely nothing in this life that can relate to just how strong and overpowering it is. But it was so wonderful. So I just started to float up the light, and as soon as I did, another smaller light angel now came and went right in front of me in the path of the light, and he did let me know that it was my time to transition on, and that I would soon be heading up further up into heaven. But at first there was something we needed to do. So he motioned like this and said, look, and he motioned to my left side, and I turned there, and I saw and had my life review. But this time I not only experienced or re-experienced my whole life over again from my own perspective, I also re-experienced it from every single other person's perspective that I had ever interacted with in my entire life. So I was able to see and feel and understand all of the consequences on everyone around me and on myself, on how every word and thought and decision and action we make all absolutely affect each other, and everything we do then ripples out to each other and then further out into society. And I saw that I wasn't judged for anything at all in my entire life. No judgment for anything. I also wasn't commended on anything either, which is completely fine. Everything just had this feeling that everything was simply unconditionally accepted just as it was. However, any of the times that I was kind to others, I felt this feeling that it was just slightly highlighted in some way. Those were the only moments. So my takeaway was that was the only thing that mattered, was how kind we were to each other in life. After my life review, I then saw this gigantic spiral of light energy, like a tornado, but a still one made out of light, that was spiraling far down into the astral realm, and I could see all my past lives sticking out underneath it. And the angel had given me an opportunity if I wanted to review my previous past lives as well. But since in this lifetime, in my teen years, my angels had already started to show me a bunch of my past lives, I had let them know, no, it's okay. I don't need to review those as well this time. So the angel said, okay. And I started to follow him further up into the light, and I was so excited, and I wanted absolutely nothing more than to just keep going on up into that light, keep going back home, soon going back to God. And I was so happy, and that's all I wanted. However, what happened was something caught my eye that was on my lower right side, and I looked at it and I realized I was seeing all these different flashes of the future of humanity. Some things were positive or neutral that I was seeing, but a lot of things were very heavy and very sad, and it made me stop in my tracks, and I was just looking at it and I was taking this in, and I started to feel a lot of heartbreak and sorrow over the things that I was looking at. The angel realized that I had stopped, so he stopped and turned around and was just waiting for me to process this, because I was supposed to keep following him up. Instead, what I said to him was, would all of these negative events still happen if I hadn't have died right now? And the angel said, what is simply the future that is currently set to be? Yet any possible change could conceivably change what is yet to come. So I asked the angel, is it possible at all for me to go back and attempt to stop some of these negative events from taking place? And the angel slowly said, we must warn you. There's a possibility you may not succeed in stopping any negative event or even change anything for their betterment, but we will leave the decision up to you if you wish to return to Earth or not. So I said, okay. Even knowing I may not be able to change anything, I at least have to try. And at that point, the angel seemed possibly a little concerned, or at least maybe that's how I took it, because I understood that was my ideal time to transition on. I had planned to only be here for 24 years. I had done everything I had come down to Earth to do. It was time for me to go on. They had already showed me what my job was going to be in the afterlife as a guide. They had previously, years before, also showed me what my next life was supposed to be. I was supposed to reincarnate next into a little girl who was going to grow up in Spain next. So I would be changing everything if I now decided to come back into this avatar body that I'm in this lifetime. However, since we have complete free will choice, even if it is our ideal time to transition on, we still have free will to change things. And because I was choosing through my free will to come back, the angel allowed it. And he did this swoop with his arm. And when he did, it somehow released me from the light that I was in. And I suddenly felt myself just falling so fast, and I just crashed so hard back into my body, which was still in my bed in my apartment. And as soon as I was now back in my body, I no longer saw the angel or anything in that ethereal realm anymore, but I distinctly heard his voice, and he told me, "Your mother is about to call you. You must turn over and answer your phone if you're going to survive." And however many seconds later, all of a sudden my phone started to ring, and it took every ounce of energy that I had just to turn over in bed onto my right side and pick up my phone. And I answered it, and it was my mother. And she had just found out that I had been in the hospital the night before, and she asked me if I needed anything, and I said yes. I have a prescription for potassium, and I don't feel well enough to get it. So she did go get the prescription for me, and I did take it, and it at least was able to regulate my heart for the next while, which is good. And the other thing I should mention is that as soon as I got back into my body, I realized something, that they seem to have allowed me to remember the rest of my NDE, but they erased and blurred out, as the best I can explain it, all those different visions that I saw of what was going to happen in the future. So I know I was looking at them, but they're just all blurred out, and that's how it's been in my mind since. And I was devastated by this, because no one had explained to me that even though that was my whole reason for wanting to come back to this body, was to stop those things that I saw in my NDE, they didn't tell me it would be erased from my mind if I came back. We actually have 4 different bodies. We actually don't just have 2. So we have our physical avatar bodies, our costumes, or whatever you'd like to call them. We have our soul bodies, or light bodies, energy bodies, whatever you'd like to call them. But then we actually even have a whole other emotional body and a mental body. So when I left my body and I was in my NDE, I had shed all of my bodies. That's the best I can explain it. I almost wonder if maybe I had a different experience of how I saw everything, because I had already shed everything. So I was actually my higher self. That's the best way I can explain it. So my emotions were just, I was just filled with so much joy, so much peace, so much clarity about everything. I didn't worry about anything, where it was completely different from my human life, because most of my life I had suffered from depression, PTSD, from some childhood trauma, and I had anxiety attacks and whatnot. So I suffered from so many different things most of my life until I had my spiritual awakening in my 40s. In my NDE, that was just all gone. It was all gone. So there was nothing to worry about. So I felt completely different. I saw things completely differently. And this is why when I chose to come back, that wasn't me choosing it, me as Nadine, this avatar I chose for this lifetime. That was my higher self. And it was interesting, because in the moment I got back down in my body, my human Nadine mind was back, and I was thinking, no, what just happened? I want to go back up into the light. I made the wrong choice. How can I have decided this? If that makes sense, I was deciding everything from the highest part of myself, and different from here. So it's a whole other experience when we regain access to just being who we truly are, which I understood we're all just pieces of God. We're each just equivalent to quarks, being God's giant body of all the universes and realms together. So our higher self is thinking more from our God self. After my near-death experience is when I lost everything and had a lot of health issues and went through a very severe depression, trying to come to terms with everything. So it seemed like at first there was some effects that wanted to come through. For example, I went to go shake somebody's hand, and I ended up having these intense flashes of everything in their life that they had experienced. And there was a lot of trauma that this person had to experience. And I just had to sit down and put my head down and process everything that was going through me, because I was feeling everything that they had experienced in their life. So there were some things that I think were coming forward right away that enhanced certain abilities and whatnot. But because then I went through such a severe depression and then decided I needed to shut down my spirituality to be accepted by society, I had closed all that down. However, all those years later, when I was finally ready to reopen my spirituality in my 40s, oh wow, that door just, there wasn't even a door anymore. That just got thrown off of its hinges and everything opened up to all these abilities and experiences. All of a sudden, one day, he just took me for another near-death-like experience, is the best I can explain it, because I don't know why otherwise. But I went astral traveling one day. I went to go lie down to do that. And this time, it felt different. I started to feel these very strong waves of energy and reverberations going through me and flashes of light. I felt like I was an old school reel film, if that makes sense. After that went through me, I suddenly showed up on the astral realm, and God shows up as this gigantic blue butterfly. And I was so excited to see him. And since I found out I can also transform into anything I want on the astral realm as well to experience it, which is something angels showed me at the beginning of my awakening. God's a big blue butterfly, so I switched myself into a small little red one. And I started to follow God as he just was flying around the universe. So we're flying around nebula and whatnot, and I was just having the time of my life chasing God as a butterfly, doing this. And after a few minutes, he suddenly stopped and just opened his butterfly wings flat and said, "Get on my back." And I know it might sound silly, but my first thought was, I'm worried because butterfly wings are so delicate, and here I am telling him, okay, but as long as that's not going to hurt you. And of course he said no. And so I gently climbed on his butterfly wing back, and I said, okay, I'm ready. And the moment that I said that, we suddenly transported to some other realm, and I'm back in my human-like form, or ethereal human-like form, and God is in this form of just a gigantic light being with just a very vague body shape. And where his face would be, though, it was constantly quickly shifting through so many different things, through people's faces, animals' faces, all different things in nature, stars, things in the cosmos, mandalas and geometry, and just everything under the sun. So his face was quickly shifting through everything. And I understood that made sense, since I had already previously had an experience of unity consciousness and got to see that God was everything in the universe, and everything has consciousness and a vibration and a beautiful tone that it gives off, and everything has God's consciousness, so God's everything. So God's showing me, okay, I'm everything, this is my face, which is all the faces, so it was wonderful. And so he's standing there with me, and this time he had up a giant projector screen in front of us, and this time I had a different life review. I only watched my life this time in front of me. Of all the times in my life that I was ever kind or helpful to anyone. That's it. I saw those in order, and God took absolutely everything else out in my life. And but at the time that I got to the end of this, I felt so undeserving of watching that, because that wasn't my whole life. So I literally told God, that wasn't my life. I'm nowhere near perfect, and I've made mistakes before, and I've hurt people's feelings before. Where are all those things? Put them back in. And God said, that is of no concern to me. I want you to see how kind you are. Look at how your kindness has affected others. I watched a bit of that on the screen, and then I saw myself at the end on the screen. I saw behind me, there was this golden plaque, and there was 3 rows of butterflies on them, and they looked like butterfly badges, is the best I can explain it. That I somehow understood that I had earned, maybe, or in some way from previous lifetimes, but I saw that there was much more room on the plaque of other empty rows where I can earn more butterfly badges along the way. And then I saw myself on the screen just laughing and giggling, and I saw a gigantic swarm of mini butterflies that I still don't know if they came up from behind me or through the top of my head and went straight up and just did this huge swarm all around me on the screen, and I was just like laughing and loved it. And the butterflies started to go away, and God looks at me and says, see, you were always meant to be a butterfly one day. And that is when I burst out crying. So, poor God, he's just standing there. I'm just crying my eyes out. And I had felt just so undeserving. Just having, even just being there, having that experience with him, having him show me this and tell me all this, and I just couldn't handle it. And God saw that I couldn't process it all in the moment. So he did the absolute sweetest thing that any caring parent could have done. So he switched us back instantly both into butterflies again, and he wanted me to follow him again, which I did, and we're flying through this tropical rainforest in some realm somewhere in heaven, it felt like, and it was just so beautiful, and the energies and the colors and goodness of everything was just so unbelievable. And he took me to this waterfall, and in front of the waterfall there was a rainbow, but in this rainbow you can actually go into it. It doesn't disappear. And we took turns going into the rainbow and flying up and down and coming out. We took turns doing that. The rainbow was his unconditional love energy again, and it just absolutely filled me up and encompassed me again just by being in it. And I was so thankful for him again, just for allowing me for a second time to be able to experience that love energy, and I thanked him. Then he wanted me to follow him to behind the waterfall, and I did, and we flew behind it, and there was this rough cutout in the rocks back there, and he landed on one edge of it and I landed on the other. And I looked in and I saw that there was all kinds of other gigantic butterflies like God size inside, and they each had the most intricate designs and colors, many in heaven that don't exist here as well. So the most beautiful butterfly wing designs and colors that are so much more intricate that you would see down here. And I understood that these were actually all ascended masters, and this is where they hang out in a secret butterfly clubhouse behind a waterfall. And God told me, go to them. And I was really nervous. I wanted to listen to God though, so I flew in and I went to a bottom right-hand corner because I thought, okay, I'm just gonna go sit in the corner, just, no one mind me. And as soon as I landed back there though, the very tip of my wing brushed the tip of another butterfly who had mostly these dark purple colors in his wings. And as soon as the two of us connected, him and I now both transported again to another location. And I transported back into my ethereal human-looking form, and he turned into Ganesh, who's a Hindu god with the head of an elephant, and he had the most excited, joyful, happy energy just bursting out of him. So it felt so wonderful to be in his presence as well. And he was teaching me a few different lessons, and they were things that were very much catered to me, because before my spiritual awakening, where I had a lot of work to do on myself, especially that first year, I had been, practically a hermit for years. I was pretty much afraid of everyone and everything, and always just stayed home. So he was really trying to show me how I needed to get out into the world, especially since they had told me right away, you're going to have to do talks, you're going to have to get your messages out and everything. And I was so overwhelmed, because here I am being a hermit, just wanting to stay at home and having no social media, nothing, and wanting to just stay in my more cocoon where it's safe. He was trying to show me, in any case, how important it is. I got to get out there. I need to be more okay with it. I need to interact with everyone in every different way, shape, and form, and even showed me that it is part of every older soul's role, that we are here to all help each other, and we are here as the older souls to help the younger souls. So it is part of the process that I need to learn to be comfortable and do this. So in any case, he was showing me those different lessons. He was showing me some visions relating to that. So then I thanked him for his lessons. And then this time everything just faded away. And I thankfully this time gently ended up back into my body and didn't have to crash back into it like in my original NDE. And that was the end of that experience. From my near-death-like experience, it was two profound things that I took away from God. Because, by the way, when I say he for God, it's just out of habit from my youth. God isn't male or female. I should always make that clear. All ethereal light beings are all genderless. They've explained, so excuse me for still using he for God. The two things that in both my life reviews I got to see is the only thing God cared about is how kind we are to each other, and how our kindness affected others and then rippled out from there into society. That's it. So that was so beautiful to see. There's absolutely no judgment at all. From him, from angels, from any light being, everything is just completely accepted as it is. So it's so wonderful to see that that's the only thing that God was interested in. And the other aspect with the whole butterfly theme, I was actually shown that it's in all our paths. All of us are on a path over thousands of lifetimes to each become an ascended master one day. And this is what God was telling me, saying, you're always meant to be a butterfly one day. That's what he was saying. You're always meant to be an ascended master one day. And he didn't just mean me. He means everyone. This is all our paths over all our lifetimes to eventually each be one as well. So I thought that was beautiful of what he was trying to show me. And furthermore, to the butterfly aspect, they did show me at one point, I had an experience where at one point I turned into this ethereal a caterpillar, we'll just say. That freaked me out at first because I didn't understand why I turned into a caterpillar with all these wings all over me. And at another point, weeks later, they showed me bursting out of a cocoon, and they showed me when I did, I was an ethereal, more feminine type light being, but I had a pair of wings, and the wings were just made out of white light. So I understood that over time, as we become our ascended masters, we get to create our own wings. So we get to create our own colors and designs and everything over time to eventually create our own pieces of art on our own wings in our own ethereal butterfly forms, to the end of where I saw where the ascended masters are all hiding out behind the waterfall and have created themselves as their own pieces of art. So it's something beautiful that I saw, which also goes along with one last teaching that God showed me at another point, where I asked God once what was his inspiration and motivation for creating us. And he said, you're all my living pieces of art, of course. And he says, you're each my art and symphonies. And it was beautiful to see that we're each his living, breathing art pieces. And in turn, we also create as well, right? And then which creates and creates. We are made out of multiple different realms and universes together, but we're part of the God's body system, or the universe system. I'm not sure what to call it. So we're all pieces of, equivalent to quarks, living inside of God's body. So we're pieces of God connected to him. So we can't ever be separated from him since we're living in his body. They're part of certain beings that were created many years ago when God still created them out of himself, but they're separated. So they actually see us as a much higher level. Interestingly enough, we see them up here a lot of times and us down here, and they see the other way around, us up here and them here, because of this direct connection with God. So they let me know that as much as it is possible for anyone to ever transition one or the other, they said no, it's almost never been done, and no one ever would, because then you would lose that direct connection with God. It's interesting what they told me about all that. So we're actually made in a different system. With me, I just see it as everything that I experienced not because I'm any different from anyone else, not because I deserved anything more than anyone else. I literally just offered everything along the way, and they literally gave me a corresponding spiritual experience or message or whatever it might have been, to go with everything I offered. Everything is a completely free will choice. And I'm just saying that I'm sure anyone else can too. So that's, I think, what happened to me. From all my experiences with all different light beings, they all just unconditionally love us, unconditionally accept us. They actually showed me that there actually is no such thing as forgiveness. And what I mean by that is there is never a need for forgiveness on their realm, because they always only unconditionally accept and love everyone just as they are. No one ever does anything to ever upset anyone, if that makes sense, for them to ever need to forgive anyone. So they showed me that there's so many things down here that are just human made, such as forgiveness, that we created ourselves at times, because there's times that there's a need for it. But if it helps, we are all unconditionally loved, we are all unconditionally accepted. So no one is ever judged ever for anything. So in case that ever is anything that anyone is ever worried about, put it aside, because you will be absolutely accepted just for who you are, no matter what. On the other side, I think that because we're each so unique, and we are, and our lives and even what makes us transition over are all unique, I think this is why every single person, even who has NDEs, has their own unique experience. And I think it's beautiful and wonderful. So how I see it is we each end up getting exactly what we need, corresponding to what might be happening. For me, I had so many experiences and I wasn't afraid of anything. I knew where to go. I knew what was happening. So I think it was a different experience for me. But for others, understanding it might be a shock, ending up on the other side, not knowing what's going on. So there, from what I've seen for certain others, there's a process of gently having someone go through the different processes of whatever's going on, helping them with whatever they need. They might even have passed on loved ones coming to greet them first. So whatever somebody needs, that's how I feel and understand that it is from the other side. So you are going to receive the proper help and everything that's needed for you to be able to make that transition. That's how I see it. And I think that's a beautiful process. And even with angels, for example, they showed me that at times if somebody may have an ability open to maybe see them or hear them or whatnot, they might test something that's test someone to say something or do something, but they're very gentle. So they say if somebody gets scared, that's the last thing they want to do is scare us. So, they'll pull back, and that's okay. And a lot of times they'll first show up as wearing a human shell, a human form, so not to scare somebody. So they will always work with us at the level that we're at and be very gentle and take one step at a time. You will receive what you need for the moment to be able to make that the gentlest and beneficial process for you to go through. You are all so powerful. We're all actual pieces of God, all living in God's body. So there's nothing to ever fear, there's nothing to ever worry about. And we're all on these beautiful paths, just learning to very slowly relearn all our lessons in life, which Earth is just a giant school. They told me nothing's about punishment, everything is just a learning experience. There's nothing to fear, we're just here to learn. And when you go back home, we reconnect all together, be all connected mentally, emotionally, and in every way with each other as all the little beautiful pieces of God that we are.